Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar, Living with Uncertainty in Rare Disease. I'm going to start by briefly introducing myself and Folia Health, and then I'll pass it over to Dr. Freedman, who is going to be speaking with us today. So some of you might know me. My name is Ani. I work at Folia Health. Folia is a free app designed to help people track every detail of their health journey. We've been around for about 9 years, and we are committed to building a platform that is accessible and useful for everyone, regardless of their condition or their diagnosis. So I work on the research side of Folia, where I support our wonderful and incredible research participants. Right now, we have 6 active research studies across a variety of conditions. And we're starting new research studies all the time. You can see our active research studies through this QR code on the screen. Our research participants track not only to build their own personalized health records, but also to help turn their lived experiences and observations into actionable insights. Because we do truly believe that patients and caregivers are the experts in their own conditions. Even if none of these current studies that we have on this QR code apply to you, I still encourage you to download Folia and start tracking for yourself and for your own benefit. Without further ado, I'd love to welcome Dr. Freedman to speak. Dr. Freedman is a psychologist who specializes in supporting families who are navigating rare disease, and he also brings a perspective of being a rare disease caregiver himself. Today he's going to be speaking with us about navigating change, uncertainty, and the unknown in chronic illness and rare disease. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Freedman.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ani. It's a pleasure to be here today. I appreciate the opportunity to share some of what I've learned over the past 30 years about the experience of living with uncertainty in rare disease. I'm going to share just a little bit about myself and who I am and why I'm here today. Ani, you can move to the next slide, please. I am a psychologist, and I specialize, as Ani said, in supporting the needs of patients and families affected by rare disease. I come to this work because of a very personal experience. Next slide, please, Ani. As Ani said, in rare disease, lived experience is so valuable. And my son, Jack, in the photograph here with me, was born 31 years ago in Madison, Wisconsin, a healthy 8.5-pound baby, our first baby. And baby Jack, unfortunately, at the age of 6 months, when he went for his pediatrician appointment, when he was an infant, wasn't sitting up and he wasn't rolling over the way that normal babies do at the age of 6 months. In the space of 4 days from that pediatrician appointment to the following Monday or Tuesday, we learned that baby Jack wasn't a healthy baby. He was diagnosed with a rare disease called SMA, spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA, a neuromuscular disease that at the time had no treatment and no cure. Our family was devastated by this diagnosis because we were told by the doctors at the time that baby Jack would live only to the age of 2 years old. So our lives were flipped upside down. The first experience psychologically that I experienced was trauma, the trauma of the life that we thought we had with our child not being the life ahead of us. And once I got my feet under me as a dad, it was a lot of uncertainty. It's a very hard way to live, uncertainty. Thankfully, baby Jack didn't fully cooperate with the original prognosis. Baby Jack grew up to be a young man and lived to the age of 26. And I was very, very lucky to be his dad for so many years. And because of my son and the experience of taking care of him, I learned how to carry the experience of uncertainty for 25 and a half years. And it was not an easy feeling to have all those years, but I certainly feel more gratitude than sadness because of the 25 bonus years we had with our son that we didn't expect. So I come to this presentation and to my work as a psychologist with great respect for all members of the rare disease community who face uncertainty. And these days, professionally, next slide, please, Ani, I spend my time doing what I can to support other patients and families affected by rare disease. This is a symbol of the work. Much of my work is done confidentially, so I can't show pictures of what I do, but this is a support group as an example of the many types of work I do to support other patients and families. This is a support group called Talk It Out that we have at the Cure SMA conference. As I said, my son had spinal muscular atrophy, and this organization has become an extended family to me. These children are affected by the same condition my son has, and they have the opportunity in this support group to talk about the experience of having a rare disease without their parents in the room. And over 20 some years of co facilitating these groups, I've learned a great deal from the children about the experience of having a rare disease and specifically with the uncertainty about their futures. I should also mention that I have a daughter. My daughter, Kara, is standing next to me in the back of that photograph. Baby Kara came from Korea as an infant when our son Jack was 5 years old. And Kara is now 26 years old and not only volunteers at our Cure SMA conference, but I'm very proud of her as she works full time at NORD, the National Organization of Rare Disorders, in the research department. Um, so this is a symbol of the work. My day to day now includes facilitating support groups like this online and in person occasionally with rare disease patients, caregivers, families who've lost children, as I have, newly diagnosed, and some specialty groups for about 6 or 7 rare disease advocacy organizations. I consult with biopharmaceutical companies in support of patient programs, designing and delivering patient support programs to make it possible for rare disease patients and families to feel supported not only by the medical treatments and care that's available, but by their mental health and emotional health needs. So the facilitation of support groups is a core part of what I do. Presentations, education like this on the experience of rare disease and the experience of uncertainty is something I do on a day-to-day basis. And I feel very privileged to share what I know and thankful to my son, Jack, for educating me, as well as more than a PhD in psychology could help me to support our communities. So thank you, Ani and Folia Health, for hosting this today. We're going to talk about the experience of uncertainty today. Next slide, please, Ani. One of the many lessons I've learned over 30 years of rare disease, there's a series of about 10 lessons I've learned, and kind of putting the microscope today on this lesson. It's very hard to live with uncertainty. And wherever I go in the world of rare disease, in the United States and in other countries, regardless of the rare disease condition, the medical manifestations, regardless of the culture, regardless of the country, uncertainty is what we all have in common in rare disease. It's a hard way to live, not knowing what the future will hold. And it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of practice to manage the experience of uncertainty. It's a universal experience in rare disease and something that is hard to manage, inherent in the situation we find ourselves in, and something that's important to talk about. For me, as a dad, there were sort of 2 types of uncertainty, and this is what I find with many of the patients and rare disease communities I support. The first is the big existential type questions. Next slide, please, Ani. When we receive a rare disease diagnosis and we're trying to make our way to understanding how to move forward with our lives, it's very common for patients I work with to struggle with big existential questions. Why me? Why our family? This is something I struggled with in the first weeks after our baby's diagnosis. We try to make meaning out of something that feels completely out of nowhere and completely random and completely a surprise. And we try to make sense out of why would this happen to me? Why would this happen to our family? It's a huge existential question. And there's no real good answer to that question. Shortly after my baby's diagnosis, I read a famous book called Why Bad Things Happen to Good People. And in that book, a rabbi, a father who had a child with complicated medical needs, asked the same question, grapples with that in a book that sold millions and millions of copies. And he concludes it, and for some things, there's no answer. There's some things happen without a reason. I found that book very comforting at the time. And it's important for everyone who receives a rare disease diagnosis to have the opportunity to, to struggle with these questions and to articulate them and to work through them. Many of the patients that I work with wonder, how long will I live? How long will my family member live, if it's a child or a spouse or a family member? In our case, we had to struggle with that question. We were told baby Jack would only live to the age of 2. And you don't forget that when you hear news like that from a doctor, even after the second and third and fourth and fifth birthday party. How long will our baby live was a cloud that followed us all the way through. This is a struggle for many patients with rare disease for whom there are no treatments, or treatments that help but don't cure the condition. Sadly, rare disease can be life-altering, and people live shorter lives with some rare diseases than they would without that rare disease. Where do I fit into the world, and who's going to take care of me, are other existential questions that are common for patients and families affected by rare disease. The world is not a very forgiving place for people who are different, people who have physical limitations, people who look different, act different, need different things. We want to be accepted. We want to find our way, and we understandably wonder, how will we fit into the world in this situation? Who's going to take care of me is a question, a big macro question that I hear, especially from young adults who've made it through childhood, whose parents are getting older, and who need care sometimes around the clock. This was something that I worried about before my son's passing. I worried as much about mom and dad, uh, uh, Jack outliving mom and dad versus the other way around, because who would take care of Jack if we weren't here? These are very complicated existential questions that come and affect us profoundly and deeply in the experience of rare disease. Next slide, honey. In the beginning, after a newly diagnosed patient or family experiences the trauma of the diagnosis, the experience of uncertainty um, shifts a bit. It becomes part of our experience rather than being a crisis. In the very beginning, for me as a dad, the uncertainty was a crisis. How long would baby Jack live? What would be the circumstances of his passing? And how would we move forward with our lives? And how would I be emotionally whole coming through that experience? Were huge questions that felt like a crisis. It felt like an impossible position to be in with no solution. And then over time, as we get our emotional feet under us, most people affected by rare disease start to adapt and accommodate to uncertainty not being an acute crisis, but being part of our daily experience. We adapt to the reality that we cannot tell the future, that we do not know what the future will hold. The reality is, for people who don't have a rare disease, we don't know what the future will hold either. But a rare disease forces us to live in the moment, appreciate every day, and understand that life is uncertain and the future is unpredictable. Um, the world has experienced this twice in the past couple of decades. Um, one, 9/11, and two, the pandemic. Both of those both of those experiences were crises for the world and for the country. Everybody's sense of what was normal flipped upside down, and everybody felt threatened and in danger by a terrorist attack to 9/11 and by the pandemic. So other people in the world then, I thought, were able to relate a little better to our experience with uncertainty on a day-to-day basis and existentially, um, in the experience of rare disease. Um, for people with rare disease, this becomes part of our experience, not an event like 9/11 or the pandemic or a rare disease diagnosis. And as we move into that daily experience of uncertainty, next slide, please, Ani. We start to zero in on the daily questions, the day to day, from macro to micro questions that come with a rare disease. Will our medications arrive on time? Will today be a good day, or will I have a flare? Many conditions in rare that I work with have different types of flare ups in symptoms. Is a specialist going to be available when we go to the hospital and we need a specialist? And is this new symptom something to worry about, or will it be nothing? So every family and every patient have different versions of these day to day questions. And as time passed with our own son, the day to day questions shifted in this direction. That last line on this slide, when baby Jack had a cough or a sneeze or a cold as he got older, we had to wonder, will this turn into nothing? Or will this be a week in the hospital or a month in the hospital or potentially life threatening? Because all of those scenarios played out over the years. It's hard to live with uncertainty like that when you or your family member has a symptom that could range from nothing to life threatening. The daily questions that families like mine experience are will is the wheelchair working properly so that our son can drive independently? Is the night nurse. We had nurses who took care of us, that took care of our son day and night as he got older and his condition became more complicated. If that nurse didn't come at 7 o'clock at night, then I was a night nurse and I would be in Jack's room and I wouldn't get much sleep. That was a daily question every 12 hours when nurses change shifts. Is the van that we use to take Jack out to the mall or to the hospital if he's sick, the tires okay? Is the engine okay? Is the handicap lift on the back of the van working properly? So those of us who are affected by rare disease know there are a million different things that happen any given day related to the care, related to medication availability, related to medical supply availability, related to medical personnel availability, related to does the wheelchair work, related to is a symptom going to be a big deal or a small deal. And all of these types of scenarios and all these questions leave us leave us living with uncertainty at the macro level, the big existential level, and also at the daily level. I look back upon those years as kind of a crazy game of whack-a-mole. When I solved one problem for Jack, then another one would pop up, and I'd solve that problem and another one would pop up. So uncertainty followed us all the way through his life and all the way through his days. Next slide, please, Ani. Which leads to this reality that in rare disease, uncertainty follows us. It follows us quietly, and it follows us everywhere and all the time. And the reason that quietly and everywhere and all the time are emphasized here is because many conditions in rare, many of you listening today may have a rare disease that is not as visible as a condition like my son's. My son would drive his wheelchair in a room and everybody could see he had a problem, something very unusual and something rare. But many of the patients and families I work with in communities have rare diseases that are just as intrusive, but not necessarily visible to other people. And so when we're out in the world doing our daily stuff, the uncertainty follows us, and sometimes very quietly and all the time, but the people around us may not understand and may not know why we are on edge and why we are paying attention to all kinds of things that other people aren't, and why we need to do things differently. In rare disease, we can't do things the same way everybody else does. We have to do a lot of workarounds. We have to be creative and we have to think out of the box. So the uncertainty that follows us manifests in different ways quietly and everywhere and all the time in ways that sometimes others are aware of and sometimes they're not. Next slide, please, Patty. One of the most common questions I receive as a psychologist specializing in rare disease is this normal, Dr. Rao? Is this normal? And, excuse me, is it normal, Dr. Rao, that I hold my breath when something feels off? Is it normal that I wake up the night before every MD appointment because the doctor's going to examine me or do a medical test that's going to help me to know if my condition is deteriorating or regressing? Is it normal, Dr. Al, that I still feel something else bad is going to happen, another shoe's going to drop? And the answer to these questions that are rooted on uncertainty is yes, absolutely. These are normal responses to an unusual situation. A lot of people ask me as a psychologist questions like this because they're worried that they're having some kind of mental health symptom or mental health break. And in a lot of my work with rare disease patients and communities is based in reassurance and educating people that these responses are normal responses to a crazy situation. You're not crazy. The situation we're in is crazy. And and that's why it's called rare. We're dealing with something very, very unusual and very, very profoundly impactful and often an acute response, especially with a new diagnosis. I myself had unusual responses, especially after our baby's diagnosis. I was driving 40 miles an hour in the right lane of the highway, thinking that it wasn't safe. I would get in an accident. I thought another shoe was going to drop. I was afraid to light the fireplace in the house we were living at the time. I was going to burn the house down if I had set the fireplace. And your mind plays tricks on you in different ways. When our daughter was adopted from Korea, I didn't believe she would walk. And I watched her walk. And until she was 4 or 5 years old, I watched her very closely because our first child never walked. So, because the first child didn't walk, my mind said, well, why would the second child walk? So, is that normal for me to be watching a perfectly healthy child walk when she was 4 years old and she'd been walking? Well, not to some people, but to me, it made sense to question things because of the experience of uncertainty and the trauma of what happens in rare disease. So, no, you're not crazy. The situation is crazy, and you're having a normal response to a crazy situation, is the way it works 98% of the time when I'm asked these questions. Next slide, please, honey. The edge is closer than other people realize. And what I mean by this statement is that when we are dealing with a rare disease, the margin for error in some cases is very, very thin. And we have to be so acutely aware of every small thing when we're dealing with a rare disease, whether the manifestations are medical or behavioral, whatever the manifestations are, the edge is always closer, often closer than other people realize. With our son, we had to monitor his heart rate and his breathing, and he used a ventilator the last few years of his life. We had to make sure that that ventilator was charged up. We had to make sure that the handicap van was working properly. I had to make sure that I had a nurse with me the last few years of his life and all kinds of emergency supplies when we left the house, just even to go out to the mall. It was like moving a hospital, a little mass unit. And for other rare diseases, diseases that have to do with nutritional issues and needing to be careful what one eats, how much protein is included, different types of mitochondrial conditions, different types of behavioral conditions, when out in public, parents and caregivers of patients with rare disease have to be mindful of small things to keep our family members safe. And because of that, we kind of live on the edge. And we kind of live on the edge in ways that are not necessarily visible to everybody else. And when the edge is visible to other people, they may be confused by why we're on edge and why we're paying attention to such small things that are maybe invisible to other people. Living with uncertainty comes with it this edge that's closer than other people often realize, and that causes us to need to be aware and on top of things in ways that are necessary, uh, but taxing, emotionally taxing. Living with uncertainty is challenging. Next slide, please, honey. I'm going to move, kind of shift directions now from explaining the types of uncertainty that people in rare experience and the reason that people in rare experience these things to solutions. How do we manage? How do we cope with the experience of uncertainty in rare disease? What are the things that we can do to dial down our level of uncertainty? And the reason this is important is that uncertainty, uh, planting seeds of uncertainty, when it grows, it can grow into anxiety. And anxiety can be very intrusive and interfere with our ability to take care of ourselves as rare disease patient or to take care of our family members who are struggling with rare disease. And these are some of the things that help with the uncertainty. I'm going to walk through them one at a time. First, when we have a rare disease, very few people know what it is. Most people don't know even the name of our rare disease when they hear of it. I had never heard of spinal muscular atrophy until the day my son was diagnosed. And I was very scared and filled with fear and filled with uncertainty initially. I felt better when I met doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals who knew more about the condition than I did. So, the first thing that helps when we're dealing with the uncertainty of a rare disease is building the right care team for you. And the right care team for you depends on who you are, what your condition is, where you live, and the proximity of professionals who know about your condition. When we build the right care team for us, it helps to reduce the anxiety and the uncertainty that comes with the rare disease. And sometimes it takes time to find the right care team because specialists for conditions are scattered around the country, not always in our local areas. But I can tell you that over and over, as I support families' psychological needs, that oftentimes the counseling sessions lead back to this point. The anxiety that people experience come from the fact that they sometimes don't have the proper care team that they feel confident about. We feel more confident when the physicians who are caring for us have seen many other patients with our same condition rather than no patients with the same condition or just one or two. Sometimes it takes some creativity, some travel, or some online appointments and consultations to find the right care team. But when you have the right care team, you feel less uncertainty and you feel more confident. As hard as it was to bring a baby home from those consultations when we received our baby's diagnosis, I felt less scared and less fearful when I had the support of physicians who knew about SMA and knew about what we could do to help keep Jack as stable as possible for as long as possible and taught us how to use the proper equipment and taught us how to do physical therapy with him and the breathing exercises with him, then it helped us feel more in control. Which leads to the second point. Make the care plan as solid as you can and follow it. When we're living with uncertainty of a rare disease and there are certain things that we know we can't control, this leads to the third point too. It helps us to focus on what we can control. We can control how we put together a care plan, we can control that we have protocols to follow, that we do the treatment that is recommended for the condition we have, that we do whatever the physical therapy or occupational therapy or medications or exercise, whatever it is that we can do to prevent the symptoms from intruding. And also to have emergency plans. In our son's case, he was very medically fragile. And so it really made me feel less scared when we had the emergency steps. If this happens, here's what to do. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, posted on the wall above his bed. There were different types of care plans. Some the routine care, some emergency plans of contact numbers for people. So if we have a care plan that's very solid and everybody's following it the same way, then we feel less uncertainty because we are controlling what we can control. The heart of what helps is focusing on what you can control, the third point on this slide. And what you can control is assembling a care team, having the proper support for the patient, for yourself or your family member, and getting more support if the family itself can't manage on its own. We couldn't manage entirely on our own at a certain point, and we needed to have nurses to help us in the home. Following the care plan helps us to feel more confident, as I just said. We also can control our routines, how we schedule our time, how we can be intentional in rare disease about how we use our time. When we wake up in the morning, what's our day look like? Some people in rare are able to work. Some patients with rare diseases are able to work. My son had 2 part-time jobs in his later years, and they were very important for him in terms of having structure, school, work, uh, any kind of activities that can be built into a day-to-day routine helps people manage uncertainty, in part because we all, by nature, feel better when we're occupied and busy enough of the time. If we're unoccupied and we're not busy at all, it leaves our mind open to think about all the things that we can't control. So having a routine is something we can control, and following that routine. These are simple things, but important things to keep in mind when it comes to managing uncertainty. The fourth point here, life outside the disease. I can tell you that the patients affected by rare disease who I counsel and work with, both individually and in groups, are more solid emotionally, and their mental health is sturdier when people have things to do that are meaningful outside of the condition itself. You are not your rare disease. You're a person affected by a rare disease. And when you're diagnosed with a rare disease, you don't lose who you are as a person. You don't lose your skills. You don't lose your knowledge. You don't lose your relationships. You don't lose your 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 positive qualities. You are not your disease. You are a person affected by a rare disease. And it's really important, in my experience, for patients affected by rare disease and their family members who are caring for them to continue to make room for life outside the disease so that the rare disease doesn't become one's identity. Hobbies, interests, work, exercise, relationships, music, movies, it doesn't matter what. It matters that there are experiences that you have that you're good at, that you're interested in, that feel good to you, it give you meaning and purpose. That we can control. And it's important that we don't have our disease become our identities. And finally, practice the things that provide you emotional fuel. This can take many, many forms. Um, there certainly, I'm a psychologist, and certainly formal therapy, counseling, and one-on-one environment is something that provides some people emotional fuel. I can tell you because I facilitate many, many support groups with rare disease communities that having the support uh, uh, of others who share the same experience and have connections with other people provides a lot of emotional fuel for the patients and caregivers who participate in those groups. People ask me as a psychologist, what method of treatment works? Well, you can do counseling and you can do support groups, but you also can find emotional fuel from meditation, from different kinds of breathing exercises that help one to ground themselves, guided imagery exercises. There are all kinds of types of interaction that you can have with other people, with professionals, with yourself that will help you to put fuel in your tank. The simplest are connectedness with other people. We feel better and less uncertain when we are not alone. We feel better, we feel less uncertain when we're connected with other people, whether they're other people in our rare disease community, whether they're people in our families, whether they're our partners and spouses, whether they're our work colleagues, our friends. It's so very important, even in the face of rare disease, which makes it very hard for many of the people that I care for to stay connected to other people. But the more connected we are and the less isolated we are in rare disease, the more emotional fuel fills our tank and the degree of uncertainty that fills our lives or interrupts our lives because of what we can't control goes down. And as our level of uncertainty goes down because we're connected to other people and other activities that are meaningful, our level of uncertainty goes down, our sense of control and confidence increases, and we feel better. I could do hours and hours on this one, but in the spirit of time, we're going to move on to the next slide, which I think is, we've got a couple more here. Uncertainty becomes something we carry, not something that carries us. So as we fill our emotional fuel tanks in whatever ways work for us, and we are not so depleted and our uncertainty comes with us, but it doesn't boss us around, that we are feel more in control of our destinies than the uncertainty that's inherent in the condition that we have because of a rare disease. The next slide, please. And I'm going to finish with this one. My own journey over these 30 years, as you could tell from the way I share my own story, began from a place of fear upon receiving the scary news that our baby had a disease that would take his life by the age of 2. And as the years passed, I moved from that place of fear by doing some of the things. I'm not sure I was aware of some of the things I was doing that I'm articulating now, but I moved somehow from a place of fear to a place of hope, hope that uh, that I could look back upon my son's life positively and know that we did everything we could to give Jack the best life we could give him. And he was so happy and accomplished so much more than anyone ever expected. And that hope that followed him around because of how happy he was and all he was able to accomplish started to become instilled in me, which then went from fear to hope to love. I look back with love as a product of the experience I've had as a dad and as a helping professional. Um, my son, I believe, taught me what love really means in a very profound way. And I look back with so much more gratitude than regret because of everything he did accomplish. I wish for everybody that everybody listening today, everybody affected by a rare disease, that you're able to move from a place of fear to a place of hope and ultimately to be grateful for every day that we have together on this earth with our families and with our friends, and every day is a gift. I thank you for listening, and I hope this talk has been helpful to you, and we have some time to open it up for questions. And thank you, Ani and Folia Health, for hosting me today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Freedman, for not just sharing your insights, but also your story. That was very impactful. I've got a few questions that people have submitted ahead of time. If any of you have questions that you want to put in the chat, we'll do our best to get to everyone's questions. The first question we got is, as parents with multiple children and a rare disease caregiver, How do I make sure my other children don't feel like they're being left out in some way when I'm spending a lot of time taking care of my other child? And conversely, how do I make my child with PWS feel like they're included in larger family events?
Two very important questions. First, the siblings, and thanks for the question because we should acknowledge siblings as part of the rare disease family and experience. To the first question, I learned this from my daughter too, and talking with her as an adult has been helpful in making sense of how we manage such a crazy situation for her too. But the two ways that, to the first question, that I encourage parents to help siblings is one, to spend any time you can one-on-one with the sibling of an affected child, even if it's 20 minutes, even if it's going to get an ice cream cone, that one-on-one time is worth its weight in gold. And I say that with great respect to you families out there who have multiple children and have your hands full, because all those years we couldn't take our eyes off our son for a second. So it made it very hard for us to take our daughter places she needed to go and to spend the one time with her. But looking back, it was really important to find ways to carve out time for that one-on-one. Ice cream cone, lunch, a meal, any when they're young, just playing a board game with them at home, anything you can do one-on-one. And secondly, as your children get older, they're going to have their own interests, their own strengths, their own gifts, and their own activities. And you want to do everything you can to allow your siblings the space to blossom in the ways that they need to and they want to. My own daughter was captain of the tennis team in college and played softball and sang in the choir. And these were things she was really good at. And she was able to do separate from her brother, separate from the medical circus that was going on at home. And it was really important for us to not only allow, but encourage her to do those things. So encourage those things. And along with that, you may need to accept help from other families because it's not easy to get your siblings to the places they need to go when you're managing a child with a rare disease. And this is where other people often will offer to step up and help with carpools. And there were some years where other people were driving our daughter around much more than we were. And we understood the need to accept that help, and our friends and neighbors understood and supported us too. The second question, Ani, was?
Yes, it was conversely, how do I make my child with PWS or a rare disease feel like they're included in larger family events?
You do the best you can. And with PWS, as an example, there are family events that the child can fully be included in, and other events or parts of events that they can't be included in fully because of the nature of the condition. All you can do is the best you can, and always lean towards inclusion rather than exclusion when you can. And I also learned from my own community, with the SMA community, I observed other parents and talked with other parents about how they handled those situations. Um, and sometimes we can't think of all the tricks and out of the box thinking ourselves, and we learn from others and observe others as our kids get older. So I'd encourage everybody to stick with your rare communities and learn from each other how to accommodate in these types of situations. It's not one size fits all, and there's no right or wrong way to do this. We're all making our way and doing the best we can.
Great. All right, our next question. Having to retire from my career as a result of my condition, it feels a little like losing part of myself. How do I navigate life post-retirement, feeling like I didn't get to finish everything I wanted to professionally?
Retirement's complicated for many people with and without a rare disease. It will be for me in a few years from now. What I had said earlier about the importance of routine and pursuing interests and passions in one's retirement, one should keep living. And you although you may not have accomplish everything that you had hoped to in your professional career. You have the opportunity in retirement to pursue anything you want in your personal life. So my advice to people in these situations is to think about what you love, what you're passionate about, what you wish you could do, what you always wish you could do more of that you couldn't do when you were working, and structure your time. Create a routine for yourself so you're waking up in the morning with a purpose in mind and something to sink your teeth into that gives you meaning and gives you purpose.
Amazing. We had a couple of questions about this or related to this. Do you have any recommendations for coping with the emotional strain as a caregiver or care partner? I'm happy to be there for them, but sometimes I get overwhelmed. I don't want them to feel burdened with my feelings on top of their health challenges.
This is a very common question for me and a very common experience for caregivers. And having been a caregiver for 26 years, around the clock, I understand how much wear and tear there is, both physically and emotionally, in the role. The most important thing we can do as caregivers is to take breaks from caregiving. The most important thing we can do is to refuel our tanks, the same way I described refueling a patient's tanks, by sharing the responsibility of caregiving with another caregiver. So if it's mom and dad taking turns, if it's a spouse having friends or family help, and if the medical condition is more complicated, as it was with my son, to have professional caregivers come to the home to give you breaks. It's important. The person asking the question is correct. It's important that you not make the patient you're caring for, your family member, feel guilty about your caregiving role. And the way that you can work around that is, again, to share the responsibility with other caregivers so you can take a break, exercise, eat, sleep, the basics. I had to work at this myself over those years when I was, especially during the first 10 years of my son's life when I was a night nurse, 3 nights a week, up all night. It's very hard to sleep, eat, and take care of oneself properly. So you have to pay attention to the basics and do the things that you enjoy too, so you can take a break without feeling guilty, knowing that somebody else who is equipped to help care for your family member is doing that responsibly and safely. That will put fuel in your tank. And when you come back to the caregiving role, you're in a sturdier place and not feeling as worn down and not as at risk for letting your feelings leak out to your family member that you're feeling tired or frustrated, which are perfectly normal feelings to have when you're depleted.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. How do I cope with constant relapses? It can be very depressing.
I would need to learn a little more about what a relapse means in this case. Relapse can mean a lot of things, but I'll define that word broadly. People with rare disease that I encounter are often forced to be resilient. You get knocked down, you get back up. You get knocked down, you get back up. We had that multiple hospitalizations with our son, and it was discouraging. It was discouraging, and it is discouraging when you go 2 steps ahead and then 3 steps back, or 1 step ahead and a half a step back. What I recommend is that you lean on the people who you love and who love you. Lean on your rare disease community, because others in the community will have experienced similar challenges and similar setbacks. I found that role models within our rare disease community, other kids like my kid and other adults who had these kinds of setbacks and bounced back, and I learned from them how they were able to have the strength and the fortitude to move forward with their lives with such grace and dignity in the face of so much real adversity. Role models can help us. If somebody else can do it, it made me feel like we could too. This doesn't eliminate the problem of whatever the relapse is. It can be very discouraging and painful and frustrating, especially if it leads you to the hospital in a life-threatening condition. But the courage that others display and the grace and dignity are what helped me and our son to move forward in the face of these setbacks.
Great. So I think that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you so much for being here with us, Dr. Freedman. It was lovely to hear you speak. To our CIDP community, happy CIDP Awareness Month. To our PWS community, happy PWS Awareness Month. And to everyone else who is here, thank you so much for being part of the Folia community. The recording will be circulated with closed captions for everyone who wants it. And until then, thank you so much.